You guys ready?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad so many of you could make it, and I'm glad we're recording this for everyone who couldn't. My name is David Korkovski. I'm the Acting Dean of Students, and we're really excited to be able to offer this panel on mental health and wellness at Williston. You know, I've been here for now, this is my 24th year at Williston, and this is one area of the school that continues to grow, continues to get bigger and more important for our students. There are areas of mental health and wellness which, you know, we talk about on a regular basis right now, which weren't topics or weren't ideas or weren't anywhere in the industry 10 years ago. And we have an incredible group with us. I'm going to have each of them are going to introduce themselves. We're going to present on some of the things that we do here for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then just open it up for questions. So I am the least important person for you guys to listen to because we have some great other people here on the panel. So I'm going to have them come up and introduce themselves, and we'll get going. But thank you all for coming. Oh, Nikki?
Yeah, important. And then that way you can, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikki Chambers. I am currently serving as Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at Williston. This is my second year here. And as we think about how we integrate mental health into the broader aspects of our community, partnering with health and wellness is something that we frequently do. So I'm very excited to be here. Welcome.
And good afternoon, everyone. I am Meg Hollenbach, the Director of Mental Health Counseling here at Williston. This is my second year, and I'm also a parent to an 8th grader. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Anne, because I'll be talking in a little while.
All right, up and down. Here we go. Thank you, Meg. Yes, my name is Anne Zager. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm a school counselor here. And this is my first year, so I'm hitting the ground running, and just feels like a true pleasure and privilege to show up to work every day and put the students first and their mental health and well-being, and this idea of like community health and well-being, which we're going to spend a little more time talking about. So we will jump in, but before we do so, just to echo what Dave said, this might be a lot of information in the next 20-ish minutes that we're going to toss out to you. Let it metabolize a little bit, and you know, as the information comes through, at the end we'll have some time for questions and answers. So, before we jump into some specifics about what we offer in terms both of counseling and more broadly, we want to spend a little time just talking about something that might seem obvious but maybe isn't, which is what do we mean by mental health and wellness here at Williston. So over the last month during the start of the school year, we've been meeting with a lot of people, faculty, dorm heads, proctors, students in different contexts, in assemblies and in small classes and in all class assemblies as well, and just starting to have this conversation, focusing on the idea of like what is mental health and wellness, this sense that it's not something that some people have and other people don't. We're all in this. We all have mental health that changes and fluctuates because of the many changing circumstances in life. And so we really want to speak to this point to students and faculty and staff, and then talk about the factors that influence our mental health, which are many. So some of the factors that I can speak to that we have been bringing up in some of these groups include use of preventative care, right? What is something you can do today as a student here to prevent yourself from getting to a place of overwhelm or shutdown or panic? And working on the next point of managing stress and anxiety, right, is so much a part of that. What are those coping skills that students may or may not be aware of that we can get curious and help them discover, and then help students turn those coping skills or strategies into more sustainable self-care habits, right? This sense of practice. And that leads us into this idea of the factor of balance, which can be tricky at times, finding that balance between work and play and social life and sleep, yes, sleep and studies, right? So there are certainly times that we are all aware of that students need to have a little grit to get through something, and that sense of a little bit of a healthy push. And then there really are those times, right, when students and all of us need to not push and take a step back and take a break, and so be really, really tuned in and sensitive to those things. And that brings us to the last factor that we have up here, although there are certainly many more, that is so important on our campus, which is seeking out support. We've been engaging in a lot of conversations with students so far about ways to identify and cultivate the many different supports that are available to them on campus. And we really strive to acknowledge and honor the different roots and values that go into wellness, right? They're very varied, and we want to make space and dialogue around the many possible paths to health and well-being individually and as a community. So I will move on to the next slide here with a little bit more detail around a few specifics. What do mental health services actually look like here at Williston? So yes, myself and Meg do meet individually with students over in the health and wellness building, one-on-one, in an office, the way you might think of more traditional counseling or therapy. But it is also so important for us, and we're really focusing on this concept of integration of mental health support on campus every day, normalizing this support and increasing this support. And as you can all imagine, this integration feels more important than ever as students and everyone deal with the impact of COVID-19 and how that is affecting folks socially and emotionally. We are all in that soup, right? So we're really trying to reduce the stigma around mental health and tell students that truly it is okay to not be okay. And just a few examples of ways we are integrating mental health on campus, counselors, myself and Meg, really aligning and strategizing with the Dean's Office, with the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, working closely with coaches and athletics, one-on-one consults, but also some really interesting and exciting programming, such as one that's coming up in an assembly at the end of October. We're bringing in a panel on mental toughness, and these are Williston-affiliated folks who work in the field of athletics, and they will be exploring how to develop mental strength of mind and this idea of self-talk and a helpful inner coach, and really communicating with students how this can help them in any field, right? Whether it's in athletics, in music, art, as a public speaker, as an activist. So that is another way we're trying to integrate that into our campus. We also recently launched a new monthly health and wellness newsletter that we're putting out to the whole campus. It's full of information, lots of ideas about some great ways to keep healthy in mind and body. So again, these are just a few examples of ways that we are really working to incorporate mental health and wellness into everyday lives and normalizing it here. We also have some more initiatives coming up, such as the mental health first aid certification process, and lots of other things are cooking. So I will pause there and hand it over to Meg, who's going to talk about some of the reasons that students come in for counseling support.
All right, hello again, everyone. So now that Ann has shared about mental health, how we're trying to weave mental health into campus, take it away from being something that you only get up in the offices on the second floor of health and wellness, and bringing it into our daily lives. I think that's a very important step as we work to address the complex needs of mental health of our adolescents. And we're just not talking about mental health in a way when something is wrong, right? This is the other message that we're giving throughout campus is ups and downs through adolescence is a really typical thing, right? It's a typical thing. And if you can start to understand the normal ups and downs, what comes and goes, it is really helpful for your mental health. So as we weave throughout campus, helping students understand what's normal up and down and what are those ups and downs when it is time to stop and take notice is part of the education that we do. And if you look at the slide up here, we do keep a little bit of data on why students come into our office because it's really helpful for lots of different ways. But these are the common things that students are coming in to see us for. You know, and so they're common here at Williston, and I'd say they mirror the common things that most adolescents seek support for. And, you know, depending on who they are and where they are, they can fluctuate in frequency and intensity. And once we start to know a student's pattern, we have so many blessings being here at Williston. One of them is, you know, this is just the start of my second year, but thinking about my ability to follow these students over the next 4 years, what a gift that is to me, because I can start to see their patterns, and that can be a really helpful thing. But in these, you know, in these common areas, some come in just wanting to share what goes on with them. Some come in and they need a little bit of support to use the skills they already have. And some students come in and they don't have skills. They're like, what is this? I have no idea what's happening to me, help. And we can help with that too. I mean, we're there for a spectrum of need. And so there's no reason not to come in. There's nothing too small and there's nothing too big. We're both trained clinicians, though we call ourselves counselors to make it more accessible for everyone. But we're trained clinicians, so you know we can help with a variety of things. And you know, lastly, when we understand you know the common themes of why students come in, it also gives us a nice basis on how to build the education for faculty and staff. Because just as we're seeing this in our offices, they're definitely seeing this, you know, in and among campus. And, you know, our faculty are so dedicated to your student here that they want to understand more. So when we come out and give our education, we're basing it off this list because we want to give them what's relevant and what they can use. Again, the idea with integration is you don't have to get support by just coming up into the counseling office. You can get it in dorm life, in class life, on the field, in social circles, right? Like in lots of different places. So many families ask these questions, so I thought I would answer some of them about counseling. You might be wondering, like, okay, so how do they get to the counselor? Or what do you do behind closed doors? And is this similar to traditional therapy? Those are some big questions we get our way, so I want to speak to those a little bit. And students are linked with counseling services with us in many different ways. They can just walk in. If it's a hard day, a hard moment, something popped up, they can just walk through the door. That is one way they can see us. Families can call to make an appointment. Students can make their own appointments. Sometimes we hear from the dean's office, from Ms. Chambers, from dorm heads that something's going on, that we need a little more clarity to help your student like just feel better. And so faculty might reach out to us and we in turn then reach out to the student. But there is lots of different ways. In some ways, we're a little different than traditional therapy because that usually operates underneath the model of meeting 45 to 50 minutes, 1 to 2 weeks apart for a duration of who knows how long till everyone together decides, you know, I'm good, I want to go off and try on my own without that level of support. Here we provide what we call intermittent support, and that means a student can come into us once or a cluster of times. Always our goal is to get them back out on campus, and actually, I mean, we feel successful when they don't need us, right? And not because they don't need us because they don't want to come in. They don't need us because they're like, nope, I'm good, I think I have it, and we want to support that feeling of resiliency and success. So we're like, great, go out and try that. And then, if it feels hard again, come on back in. And so that's our model, because we are supporting the Williston community as counseling. Some students definitely want that 45-minute structure. There are many, many reasons to want that. And when that comes up for someone, we typically help with referral names. We try to be as helpful as we can in that process of families finding an outpatient therapist. During our sessions, when Ann and I close our doors and work with students, we're operating underneath some general themes, and it's the idea of support, insight, skill building, and problem solving. We always want to be supportive to students, especially our boarding students who are away from their families and actually just might need touch points, right? Like we are a touch point. We can be a touch point just to yeah, that's hard, or yeah, you go, right? Whatever it is. We can be a touch point of support. We also help students gain insight about what's going on with them so they can start to have an understanding and a language around what's going on, and that can be helpful. We're always skill building. What's getting in your way? What do you need? How can we get it? And problem solving. Usually short-term, solution-focused work. There are often questions about privacy and what we do, and we do operate under similar principles of privacy like a therapist. Like, we don't share if a student doesn't want us to share, except if there's a safety issue, and of course then we always share with home and with the adults on campus, because then safety trumps all. But generally speaking, if a student's like, nope, I don't want anyone to know I'm coming, mom's the word, we're like, okay, great. And we respect that. But oftentimes what we find is someplace in the middle, right? Is that students actually don't mind if we reach out to their supportive adults on campus, because typically something's jamming them up, right? That's why they come in, something's not working. And the supportive adults out there can actually help. So if a student comes in because they're having panic attacks at night before bed, because that's when the mind can wander, and if they're stressed, that can happen pretty frequent. And we're working on that in the office, developing skills. I'm teaching about anxiety, what it is, what it isn't, like how do you stop being afraid by that thing that comes up and start walking towards it and being like, hey, I think I might be able to handle this. If we're working on skills, and then I send them to the dorm at night, and nobody knows what they're working on, they're adolescents. So it takes them a minute to be able to hear about a skill, learn about a skill, and then what I call operationalize it, like actually put it into action. So if a student gives the okay nod for us to communicate with their dorm parent, I might fill the dorm parent in on something like, hey, I'm working with Meg. We're working on not having panic attacks before you go to bed. And could you poke your head in around teeth brushing time to see how they're doing, right? And then that dorm parent might go in and be like, Meg's kind of panicking, right? Because they know your students well. They know them very, very well. And then I would have shared, these are the first 3 things we're going to try. And everybody knows it, so the dorm parent might say something like, hey, you look a little uncomfortable, let's talk about your plan, right? You know this is a familiar thing, let's find things to help yourself. And they might remind that student to go use their plan. Or they might say, hey, let's walk down the hall and get a drink of water and settle. And then the student uses skills, feels better typically, and then that supportive adult just helped in our whole plan. So that's time when communication can be helpful. Again, it's always with permission from the student, because we also need to build trust. And then the last thing I just want to say about the outpatient therapists is sometimes students have outpatient therapists in the community, and we do communicate with them. And why we find that helpful is we never interfere with their therapy process. We don't want to do that. But again, that idea of operationalizing, taking skills that you talk about and use it here, it's sometimes, Anne and myself, we can be that medium to be like, oh, that's what you're working on. Great, we can help them translate that into their Williston life. Just the same way if they were home, for boarding students, and a therapist might connect with you around like, hey, keep an eye out, right? That same idea. I'm jumping a little to parenting support here. Being at Williston for the past year, again, I keep coming back to this idea of lots of circles of support, right? And I'm constantly being amazed as I'm looking up at this table who've been here and support our students of the different levels of circles of support. We have counselors and advisors and nurses and all the people who interact with your children. And the list goes on and on. There's actually quite a few people. And what this means to me, is when I meet a student and I'm helping them learn about themselves as a therapist, it's like a golden nugget to put them out there and be like, oh, and look at all the adults I know helping them too. It's a very, very powerful thing. So when I had the opportunity to speak with all of you today and talk to you, their most important support system, I'm like, oh, all our 10 tentacles are coming together, right? We're all spreading out in this circle around our students. And not all children have this, but ours do, and they're very lucky with it. And so today what I wanted to share is I wanted, parenting can be tricky, parenting teens can be really tricky. I have 3 teenagers myself, so I do understand. And then I can only imagine if you are a boarding student, it must feel tricky parenting as a boarding student, right? Like, when do I step in? When do I don't? It can be hard. So I have a theme, and when I was thinking about parenting support and how I can be helpful, and the theme for the tips that Ann and I were thinking about is this theme of proactive dialogues with your children, right? I know you all have good communication patterns, whether or not they're established from years before or you're just setting them up now. But there's some things, after doing this now for 18 years working with adolescents, that I found are particularly helpful, and I just want to share 2 of them. The first one is, if you read that question up above, it's the question of, how will I know when you need help? And that is a super powerful question to ask your child. You can ask them at the beginning of the year, you can ask them throughout the year. And it serves 2 functions. First, for you, it allows you to start to understand as they become the independent teenagers that we want them to be, and they start pulling away, and they want to solve problems on their own, but of course they need to come home and touch base, and especially if they're feeling emotional or something is hard. So it can clue you into like, how will I know when you need help, without you feeling like maybe you're hovering or trying to discover it. And you can feel free to ask your child, like, what does it look like? What does it sound like? Because that will let you know when you might have to step in, especially, again, boarding and you're afar and you may not be able to see it. So that is one really helpful question. The other side of that, right, for the adolescent, it gets them to start to think, well, how will my family know when I need help, right? It's that proactive approach. It's part of integration, it's part of prevention, right? They may not be able to do it yet, so that's what they're gonna learn as they grow, but it's just planting the seed, and if you keep coming back to that often, it helps that seed grow, for sure. The second tip that I wanted to talk about is, and this is something, you might have already done it, but you could also do this weekend. If your student boards here, or even if they're a day student, because they spend so much time here, this idea of like, who are the 3 supports on campus, adult supports, that you turn to if you need something, and why? That way, again, you start to have, and the answers might surprise you, it might not be who you think. They might not say, oh, Ms. Hollenbeck in counseling is my go-to, right? They might, but they might not. But they may have just different people on campus you didn't even know they felt connected with. And when we're talking about circles of support, it can help you to be like, oh, interesting. Or you might be like, yep, knew it, right? But it's just to put it out there, and it's, again, to help your adolescent think, who are my 3 go-tos on campus? If they only have one, the idea of like, well, can we think about some other people you might try? And that can be helpful. And from your perspective, if you start noticing your students struggling, they may need you to be that bridge, right, to reach out to one of those supports. When adolescents struggle, it's really sometimes scary to go forward and be like, man, I'm actually struggling, I don't even know what to say. So, from afar, being that bridge, you could send me an email, send anyone an email, like, I think they're struggling, do you mind checking in? Or you can say to your student, want me to give someone a call and just ask them to like check in with you? So that can be helpful as well. And lastly, communication with the school. It is, always very helpful, since you are all the experts in your children. It is super helpful if you start to notice patterns that are going on at home or from phone calls or texts, and you're like, wait, this has been going on for a couple of weeks. I think something's off. Always feel free to reach out to us and let us know. That can be helpful, and sometimes we just don't know. And lastly, before we stop the more formal piece of this and open it up to questions, I just wanted to take a minute to review the key points that we were talking about on how we can work together. So for family consultations, please know, if your one takeaway from today is with all this information. Please know we are here for you. So if you want to just talk through your child, if you want to let us know something, feel free to email us, call us, look us up on the website, let your advisor know that we're happy to do family consultations. We do them by phone and Zoom, so that isn't a problem ever. Again, student counseling, we're solution focused. We are focused on education, problem solving, generally like helping your student live their best Williston life, and no problem is too small or too big. For communication, we share what the student gives us permission for. If there's any risk factors, we always share those with you. And the more communication, the better. Again, especially if you feel like your student's struggling, it's usually really helpful. And then you might have a question, what can I do at home? But we've talked about a couple of points, and I just say continue to provide your awesome love and support, and always share with us what works best for your child. Again, you are the experts, so if something's going on, you can pick up the phone and be like, well, Meg, do you know what really works for Ann? And then share that, because that's really valuable information. And that's it for the formal piece.
Great.
And now we want to open it up to some questions. Again, just respecting the privacy of your students, we just ask that the questions are general versus student-specific. But if you have student-specific questions, remember at the family consultation, call us, communicate. Ann and I were here, so please reach out any way you can. Yes?
So good presentation. My name is Jacob Well, and I have concern, and I listened to some of the things you mentioned, is I usually ask consent of the student if you should tell someone or not. And also when I see that in your process of counseling, if you guys identify that a student exhibits behavior that is of danger or harm to self or others, what is the process in place that Williston has to be able to address this without compromising privacy and the child's comfort to stay in school?
For sure. You want me to start and then?
It's up to you, sure.
I'll start from the counseling perspective. If there is risk, there's a few branches that a student goes from. First of all, if there's any risk, we always take that academic pressure and everything off and just stop to help the student, right, in the moment. And one of the ways we do that is a student would come to see myself or Ann, and we would talk through what's going on. We have a whole crisis protocol that we do, and our role as counselors is assessing that safety risk. Does a student need to go to crisis services for that next level up based on our assessment? And so a whole lot of planning goes around in that moment depending on what's going on for the student and the outcome of assessing that we do. From the counseling perspective, we will immediately let family know when that is going on. There is no privacy when it comes to risk and safety because, again, safety trumps all, and they are minors. So we have to inform the family. And then within 24 hours, because our immediate focus is on the child, and then we say within 24 hours, but as soon as possible, we will have a meeting amongst us, we will have a consultation session with the family, and come up with the best plan for the student, depending on the situation. That's from
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer, and I mean, the idea that confidentiality exists as much as it can, right? But if there's any issue of harm to self or harm to others or big safety concerns, the confidentiality piece goes out the window. We're in immediate communication with parents, advisors. The student comes in. At that moment, the student will never be alone again, and we will follow our protocols that we have in place. But confidentiality and privacy are really nice ideas when dealing with minors, but they only last a certain amount of time, depending on the topic.
Along those lines, do the HIPAA laws apply to you guys as counselors?
In what degree?
I'm just curious,
Yeah.
I don't know what the age of majority is here in the state, but if
18.
they're 18 years or older and they come to you with an issue and there's no medical power of attorney or anything, are you allowed to disclose that to parents?
Yeah, we have all of our students sign off that
Yeah.
while they are under our care, that even though they're 18, they're not 18, that our contract is with the parents, our relationship is through the parent first. So even if they are of, 18, 19, we'll have a student who's 20 here this year, our primary communication is always with the family.
Yeah.
One more?
Yes, please.
So, I'm very interested in me, so that's why.
Great.
What is the school doing? In the past, mental health was viewed as a stigma, right? And I think it's a big issue right away. And I don't know if the school is doing anything with the students to make them know that if you have mental health, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay that you have it. But I think that's a big piece that is happening today, where a lot of people feel like it's a stigma, they don't want to expose it, and then they suffer from it. So is the school doing anything about that to kind of sensitize the community?
Yes, I mean, I think that's part of what this is, and it's, at assemblies, we're talking about major themes about health and wellness for the year. We have class assemblies, we have student wellness programming during the academic day. There's a whole lot of pieces to it, and while you're right, I think historically there's been a stigma attached with this topic. It's more of our generation than their generation for the most part, right? That these students are much more welcoming and familiar with the topic, and it's much easier for them to accept each other, their peers, or themselves looking for that help more so than we might have thought.
I think we also are approaching this conversation as we think about it through an equity and inclusion lens, that our students come from different backgrounds, different cultures, where there may be vastly different levels to this stigma surrounding mental health, right? So I think making the assumption that we're not all on the same page when it comes to mental health, so that we are doing that proactive work to destigmatize that, is critically important as well.
And I just want just one more point for
Yeah.
sure. And part of that theory of integration is exactly what you're talking about. It's this idea of like, if we have it up only in other offices, there's a stigma like, oh, I have to go there to talk about my mental health, right? And so we're trying to get in campus, and then with what I call our frontline staff, the staff who interacts a lot with the students, we're rolling out an education process for them, that teaching them how to like reduce the stigma of accessing help too, because a lot is in language, right? A lot's in language. And that's when like we want the language to be with us, as leaders in the school, but then also with all the adults on campus, because there's lots of different people who people turn to. Not everyone's going to turn to me or you, but trying to roll that out, not only just with students, but also with faculty. Like, how do you know what questions to ask someone? How do you say, if you think someone needs to go see the counselors, how do you say it in a way that doesn't stigmatize it? Not like, oh, you need to see a counselor on that, right? But to be, right? But to be like, how do you craft that conversation? And that's what we're rolling out on campus too, and I think is very, very key to the stigmatization that happens. And I see patterns around campus, who comes up, who doesn't, right? That's also some of the things that we're keeping some data on and trying to address that as the patterns rear its head.
I also see us kind of promoting this general dialogue around campus, right? This notion that it's okay to not be okay, right? So you don't have to say, I'm fine. I'm like, I don't believe you. And it's okay, right? And it's okay to not be okay. And there are adults around here who really want to support you. And we'll start to ask those critical questions in a dorm. Being on duty is so amazing because you get to connect with students one-on-one. And so I'll see dorm parents, and I'll see, student proctors, and I'll hear conversations around, okay, you're seeming really stressed. What are you doing to take care of yourself? And sometimes it's those questions that will remind students, okay, I need to start thinking about my self-care, my wellness, and how am I taking care of myself? How am I balancing my academics with all of these other pressures that I have going on in my life?
and I'll just add super briefly that noticing that happening, I'm sorry, around student leaders, right? Already identifying students on campus who want to help that destigmatization, who want to say, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to risk sharing this, and they can really normalize it. And it happens so quickly, like this domino effect among students. So I think empowering those people and having them have such impact, like back in their dorm, right? It's a flow. So I think that is work in progress, certainly, but is happening here on campus.
You've waited so long.
You know, this sounds great, but in the beginning you said you're offering in October something called mental toughness.
Yeah.
And I sort of cringed honestly when I heard that, because to me it sounds, you have to be tough. You know, as an athlete, you have to push through. As in school, you have to, you know, just that language. You talked about language. That really struck me as like, that was surprising. And I assume, given what all of you are saying, that's not what the talk is about. But I'm curious why that.
I just want to say toughness is also softness, right? And like, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, there is a lot in that word, just like this word of like pushing through. And I think I use the word grit because there's something in that word that's like, there really are times, right, when it's like holding steady for a student to do that. And, you know, I will be vulnerable and share, like, I lost a dear friend this week, right? What does it mean to be a person who is an adult on campus? Wow, this was a hard week. I had to be really honest with myself. I had to lean on my colleagues, right? Like that humanness, that softness, that I have to take care of myself tonight and not go to this after school activity, right? That is so important. And my hope is that that will come up in this assembly and will really like students and faculty and staff can start to engage around that word. But what you bring up is such a good point, and that language matters, right, too, right?
Yeah, and you know, just to clarify quickly, my office is helping to put on the assembly, and you know, really the topic is about having your sort of positive self-talk and an inner coach. That it's not as much about mental toughness as it's just about being positive in the way you speak to yourself and being positive in the way that you are assessing your current situation. And it's about resiliency and positiveness more than it is about the other end of it.
I feel like
Yeah.
if I, who am very close to this topic, sort of cringed at that, I wonder if students will see that and make a choice about how they view it. You know.
I think that's great feedback though, right? Like, like, how can we kind of break that language down? Like when we use this word, being very clear with students, right? This is what we mean. And presenting that nuance, because they'll understand that. So I think that there is a point well taken there.
I'm not sure if we used the word mental toughness with
We
the
didn't,
kids.
no.
Right,
no,
we
no.
used inner coach.
Okay.
And self-talk. No,
Self-talk,
yeah,
and
we haven't
positive
used
self-talk.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Thank you.
sure. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, up on your slide, I think one of the beginning slides, you had a bullet point on stress. And so our daughter's a new sophomore here at boarding, and it's a step up scholastically, and she's doing well. We just found out from myriad of teachers.
Well, that's good.
But she, in relating what's going on, it's a lot of pressure. She mentions the word stress quite a bit. So you know how, we don't know, that stress is stress, it is what it is. But my question is, can she just walk in and like have an appointment to learn some stress management techniques or whatever? It's like,
Yeah.
could she do the choir or whatever? Okay.
No, that is exactly, yes, absolutely, because that's part of our, like, nothing has to be wrong with you to come in, because that's a great question, like, okay, this is the next level up, it is a lot to manage, like how do we do it? So individually, yes, can just walk in, but also, you know, we are trying to infuse this throughout the campus as well. So like different core classes, there's 9th and 10th grade core now, correct? Yes. And so the core classes talk about it, talk about time management as it does with stress, like, you know, lots of different levels, as is, we're trying to infuse it through the classroom so teachers start having conversations about stress, which would be really helpful, and little opportunities to practice stress reduction. So all of it is, yes, because stress is a real thing. And if stress is combined with perfectionism, when workload goes up, and perfectionism kicks in, that can be a really hard combination to keep up with. And so if that's one of the things, if you notice a pattern like, oh, they want to be perfect and workload is hard, and we all know as adults, when workload goes up, we have to balance, like, what's my priority? Where's my energy going, right? It's a balancing game. So if you notice a pattern, you know, send them our way, you know, as well as remind them that we can help them with the little things. Yeah.
I've got two questions, and maybe I should just tackle one at a time. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, are there any formal screening mechanisms that you employ, either by way of advisors or just generally, you know, asking for self-assessments by students? Are you doing screening?
I would say we're not doing general mental health population screening, no.
What we do, one of the things we have is, we have what we call a student support team, right? It's basically all of us and a couple of other people from health and wellness who get together every week, right? And we solicit information from advisors, teachers, other people around campus. Who are we seeing? Who are we hearing from? Who are the red flags? Who are the people we're really concerned about? And that team spends Monday morning and then the rest of the week, obviously, right, talking about those students, working with them, pulling them in, talking to parents, advisors, everyone else. So there's really, really interconnected communication that's going on at the campus level. I mean, there's, in terms of screening processes and, you know, things, I think once you're in the office, they have their professional guidelines and things and procedures that they follow. But from a community-wide, the kids' biggest, I would say that one of their biggest frustrations is, how did you hear that? Or how did you know? Because we talk, right? The adults talk and we talk a lot and we talk about them because it's all about the sort of living and working and studying and being together as a campus community.
Yeah, and there is that part of the health and wellness forms at the beginning of the year that has a list like, does your child see a therapist? Would you like them to see a counselor, right? So we go through that at the beginning. So we've reached out and had a contact point with everyone who indicated on that screening, if you want. Like, it's not a formal screening, but it's a family screening. And so we have reached out to all of them. The tricky part there is, though, they have to say yes when we reach out. Like, we don't force them to come in like, well, your parents said you have to come in to see that. We never want this to be punitive. And so we don't make them come in. There's very rare times that we're like, you really need to go up and see the counselor. So, and then within individual sessions, we do use some formal diagnostic screening, especially for like, oh, is this really depression? Is this anxiety? You know, some things like that, for sure.
Yeah, I just wondered, because, you know, as the school year goes on, you know,
It's a good question.
They're facing challenges, they're facing, you know, and it just might be a good thing to say, hey, you know, this is a good thing to check in with yourself. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's a nice idea.
The other question I have is kind of the tie-in between mental health and academics. And one thing that I noticed my kids doing an awful lot is, because grades are posted all the time, right? There's no, like, you know, they obsessively check their grades, and then it's sort of like that, you know, that I'm thinking dog training, right? When you do intermittent, what is it called in behavior, right? You know, and it's just that reinforcement, and so because it's so much stronger. And I've just wondered, has Williston ever thought about academically having to say, you know what? The grades are going to get dropped at X o'clock on this date, so everybody chill out until then.
It's an absolute continuing conversation that, because we went, obviously, 5 years ago, there was no online grade book. Right? And the only time the student heard about it, their grades was when things were coming back. And you can do the math in your head, right? Or then comments came out, right? And in a week and a half, comments come out, and then you get a midterm report and all that. And now, right, there's transparency. Everyone wants to see every bit of their grade book. And you're right, that the sweet spot's somewhere in the middle, and the academic office is struggling with exactly that question right now and every day, because we hear that 100%. I mean, we absolutely hear that.
Yes.
No question about it.
Because the flip side to that experience is the experience that I have with some of my advisees, where I'm like, you didn't hand in that assignment you need to go hand in that assignment, right? So there are just so many different experiences to being a student at Williston, you know, so you have the mental health challenges that come with being an over-prepared perfectionist, and then what happens when you are having some issues kind of adjusting to some of the academic expectations that come with getting a Williston education. So as Dave said, I think it's a continuous conversation because we have to meet the needs of every student, and somewhere in the middle we can kind of figure that out.
Well, and just as our education point, you know, and I hear you, because I've spent many long times in offices trying to get students to stop checking, and sometimes even parents to stop checking because they're checking more than the students checking, and everyone's checking, and it's like, it's that driving force behind the anxiety when like behaviors actually make you more anxious, and if you stop them, you know, so for sure. But reminding them as a group, that's a great reminder to like say an assembly, right? Like check for good reasons and not for anxious ones, so thank you.
So the other question I had was, you know, I want to probably know what is the actual definition of mental health. The reason I'm saying that is that
Oh, I love it, yeah.
stress is one of the things you listed. But stress is something, personally, I do well on stress. When I'm stressed, it motivates me to do good work.
Absolutely.
Right? And some people, when they're stressed, it takes them the other route, right? So the challenge I find is at what point you're going to say, okay, are they using that mental health as a diagnosis or as a guideline? And if so, what is it? What constitutes mental health? And I think that is the challenges that we're finding. I don't know if Williston, or you guys have thought about that, to be able to not use a hammer to kill a fly, right? Who is undergoing stress, they want to go to mental health counseling. Because school is not fun, it's sometimes stressful, and it's most of the time is. So I don't know what you guys are doing in that scenario.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece there is separating stress and anxiety, right?
Yes.
That, you know, you're right that some people thrive under pressure and stress, and some people fold, right? And finding the reasons for how and why that is you know, it's all part of the relationship building. You do it with your, you know, children, I'm sure, and we all do it with these students. How do you, you know how much is too much? And, you know, how are you sort of relieving some pressure points at any given time? And that's really what all of this is, right? It's about self-care, right? It's about making sure that, you know, as a student, as a member of the community, you can identify for yourself, hopefully, right, when something is too much. And then you have resources and strategies to be able to deal with exactly that situation. And it's not overwhelming, and it's not, you know, debilitating when that sort of thing does come up. So, but yeah, I mean, yes, I certainly appreciate your point that for some people, stress is phenomenal, and for other people, it's really, really challenging.
So have you guys defined what mental health is?
Oh. I know, I'm like, I mean, it's all of it, right? Like, because, I mean, mental health affects everything we do. I mean, we can all know that, right? You know, depending on the mood when you wake up in the morning and how you switch it and how you take care of yourself. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, I'm smiling because I have like so many ideas. It's one of the reasons why I'm a therapist, but I'm also a registered nurse, right? Because I'm like, it is that intersection between body and thinking and behaviors and how we take care of ourselves, right? You know, when I work with students in anxiety, one of the things that I'm teaching them for mental health or anxiety is like, you can actually handle your life, right? Because anxiety always tells us like, it tells us so many things, never anything good. It's like blah, 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 and you can't handle that, or, you know, something really terrible is gonna happen. And so part of mental health there, right, is just starting to realize, oh, I can handle the tides of my life, the hard, stressful times around, you know, finals, when the workload is increasing. I know how to shift things around to get done what I need to do and not have to stay up 5 nights in a row to 4 in the morning, like, you know, doing some of that. But I wish I could define it as like the one thing, but I think it's the coordination between thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, that coordination, and how it's working for you. And sometimes our mental health is better, and sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not working out so good for us, so how do we flip it to feel okay or better?
Sorry to belabor the point, but there was a reason I asked that question, is one of us watched the news. People just make it look like it's a one definition, it's a diagnosis.
That's why we brought,
that you
exactly.
describe, right?
Yeah.
Which is not, right? And they don't take the time to explain to people what it is. So that drives to where the stigma is.
I
So
agree.
they attach a diagnosis to it, which is not a diagnosis. Right?
No, it's
So I
life.
think you just answered my question by, saying that it's difficult to get a definition.
And that's why we wanted to open with that idea when Ann was talking about it, because it's like, well, we throw around this term, mental health, and some people are like, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, I have it or I don't, right? And I'm like, no, we are it, like, it's us. Like, it's how we show up on the earth every day and what works for us and what doesn't.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone. I know we're over time by a little bit. I know there are parent conferences not parent conferences, receptions coming up in a few minutes at various locations. There are also conferences all weekend, and we're available and around. So if you want to talk further about any of these topics, just let us know, and enjoy family weekend.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you,
coming.
everybody. No, thank you very much.